The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly 3 miles in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, grown over 10,000 years by species that had turned to dust long before humanity learned to make fire. Floating platforms held delegates from 800 civilizations, each one representing billions of souls across thousands of worlds. The air itself hummed with translation fields, converting 1,000,000 different languages into something each species could understand. Ambassador Thomas Reed stood at the center of it all, a single human on a platform no larger than a dinner table, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the known universe. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many negotiations fail. His suit was simple black, chosen specifically because humans had learned that elaborate dress made other species think they were trying too hard. Behind him, 3 junior diplomats stood in perfect stillness, their faces revealing nothing. High Arbiter Morvith descended from the central dais, his body a nightmare of angles and shadows. The Vithrani were among the oldest species in the galaxy, beings of pure geometric form that existed partially outside normal space. When Morvith spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. "You stand before the Galactic Council, human. Your species has been aware of our existence for 67 of your years. In that time, you have expanded to 12 colony worlds, developed faster than light travel, and requested membership in our body 47 times. Thomas nodded slowly. That is correct, High Arbiter. 47 times you have been denied. Morvith's form shifted, becoming sharper, more threatening. Your species is violent, unpredictable. You war among yourselves. You consume resources without thought for tomorrow. You are, by every measure we possess, unfit for galactic civilization." A ripple of agreement passed through the chamber. The Kesori delegation, massive insectoids whose hive ships dominated the eastern spiral arm, clicked their approval. The Luminari, beings of pure energy contained in crystal vessels, pulsed in what Thomas had learned to recognize as contempt. Thomas let the moment stretch. He had studied galactic politics for 30 years, and he knew that silence could be more powerful than words. Finally, he spoke. "You are correct, High Arbiter. Humanity is violent. We have fought wars that killed millions of our own kind. We have built weapons capable of destroying our entire planet, and we came very close to using them." He paused, letting his words settle. "But I did not come here to defend humanity's past. I came here to warn you about your future." The chamber went quiet. Morvith's geometric form flickered with what might have been surprise. "Warn us?" The voice of Admiral Tessick boomed across the chamber. He was Dravari, a species of massive reptilian warriors who had conquered half the galaxy before the Council forced them to stop. His scaled face twisted into something like amusement. What could a species barely out of its cradle possibly warn the Galactic Council about? Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. 3 months ago, our Deep Space Observation Network detected something unusual in Sector 779. At first, we thought it was a sensor malfunction. Then we thought it was a natural phenomenon. He activated the device, and a hologram appeared above his platform. Then we realized what we were actually seeing. The hologram showed a region of space near the galactic rim. Empty, according to every council chart. Dead space where nothing had lived for millions of years. But the image was not empty. It showed ships. Millions of ships. Dark shapes that twisted and pulsed with terrible life, moving in formations that seemed to defy physics. "The hollow," Thomas said quietly. The reaction was immediate and violent. Delegates screamed. Platforms crashed into each other as species tried to flee. The Luminari flickered so rapidly they nearly went dark. Even Admiral Tessick, warrior of 1,000 battles, went pale beneath his scales, High Arbiter Morvith raised one angular limb, and the chamber's dampening fields activated, forcing silence. When he spoke, his voice had lost its arrogance. That is impossible. The Hollow were destroyed 6,000 years ago. The Great Alliance sacrificed 12 civilizations to stop them. They cannot have returned, and yet they have. Thomas enlarged the hologram, showing more detail. Their fleet is larger than anything in your historical records. Our projections suggest they will reach the outer council worlds in approximately 14 months. Your projections? A new voice entered the conversation. Ambassador Velith of the Morvathi Collective slithered forward on her serpentine body, her 4 eyes narrowing with suspicion. Why should we believe human projections? Your species has never even encountered the Hollow. No, Thomas agreed. But we have studied them. When you gave us access to the Council archives as part of our first contact protocols, we copied everything, including the sealed records of the last great darkness. He smiled slightly. You really should have better security on your historical databases. The chamber erupted in outrage. Species shouted accusations. The Kisori delegation demanded immediate expulsion of all humans from Council space. Admiral Tessek called for military action against Earth. Thomas waited. When the noise died down, he spoke again. You can punish us later. Right now, you have a more pressing problem. The Hollow are coming, and based on your own records, you have no way to stop them. No one can stop the Hollow, Morvith said, his voice heavy with ancient grief. They adapt to every weapon. They consume every defense. They are entropy given form. That is what your records say. Thomas agreed. They also say something else. Something very interesting. He pulled up another file, ancient text in a language dead for millennia. In every encounter with the Hollow, across 12 civilizations and 6,000 years of warfare, every species tried the same tactics: run, hide, negotiate, delay. He let the words hang in the air. No one ever simply stood their ground and fought to the last. Admiral Tessek laughed. A harsh barking sound. Because it would be suicide. The Hollow cannot be defeated through combat. Their numbers are endless. Their vessels regenerate. Their soldiers feel no pain and know no fear. Thomas turned to face the Dravari admiral directly. Neither do ours. When we have to be. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not fear, not contempt, something else. Something that might have been the first stirring of curiosity. Humanity is not here to beg for membership in your council, Thomas said, his voice carrying across the vast space. We are here because we need access to your shipyards, your industrial capacity, your resources. We are here because in 14 months, the Hollow will arrive at your borders, and when they do, we intend to be waiting for them. He turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates from a dozen different species. We intend to fight, not to delay, not to negotiate, to fight until they are destroyed or we are. And we are asking if anyone in this chamber has the courage to stand with us. The silence stretched on. Then, from the far side of the chamber, a single voice spoke. The Valorian Confederacy will stand with humanity. Thomas turned to see a slender figure rising from a distant platform. Ambassador Lyris of Valoria, her lavender skin almost glowing in the chamber's light. Her 4 eyes wet with what might have been tears. The Hollow's projected path passes directly through our space, she said. My people will be among the first consumed. We had accepted our fate. Her voice strengthened. But if humanity is willing to fight for us, then we will fight alongside them, whatever the cost. Another voice joined hers. Then another. Then a dozen more. Small civilizations. Weak civilizations. Species that had been dismissed and ignored by the great powers for centuries. But they were standing. They were choosing to fight. High Arbiter Morvith watched in silence as the chamber transformed before him. Finally, he spoke. The Galactic Council does not officially sanction this action, but neither will we prevent it. His geometric form seemed to soften slightly. Ambassador Reed, you have given us something we had lost. Something we thought the Hollow had taken from us 6,000 years ago. Thomas raised an eyebrow. And what is that, High Arbiter? Hope, Morvith said quietly. Foolish, irrational, human hope. Thomas smiled. We have found it to be more useful than you might expect. As he left the chamber, his communication device buzzed with an incoming message from Earth. He read it twice, then turned to his junior diplomats. Send word to the fleet. The Council will not help officially, but they are not stopping us either. And we have allies. He looked back at the chamber one final time. Tell Admiral Costa to begin mobilization. Tell her we are not sending the aid ships the Valorians requested. Sir? Thomas Reed smiled, and there was something ancient in that smile, something that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars and nuclear standoffs. Tell her we are sending everything. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. He paused. They asked for aid. We are going to give them an armada. The skies above Veloria Prime had been quiet for 3,000 years. The planet was a paradise of floating gardens and crystal towers, home to a gentle species that had forgotten the meaning of war. There. Military was ceremonial. Their weapons were museum pieces. When the Hollow came, they had accepted that they would simply cease to exist. Premier Aldris stood on the highest balcony of the Capitol spire, watching the horizon with awe 4 of her eyes. Her lavender skin had grown pale over the past weeks, and the empathic fields that connected all Valorians carried a constant undercurrent of fear. They could feel the Hollow approaching, a darkness in the fabric of space itself, hungry and patient. How long? She asked her science advisor. 6 days, Minister Callum replied. Perhaps 7 if they paused to consume the outer mining stations first. Aldris closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, touching the consciousness of her people. 12 billion Valorians, all feeling the same quiet terror. They had sent their message to the humans 2 weeks ago, asking only for witnesses, for someone to remember that they had existed. The humans had promised to come. But human space was far away, and their ships were slow compared to the ancient vessels of the Council races. The mathematics were cruel and simple. Help could not arrive in time. Premier, a young communications officer, called from inside the chamber, his voice trembling. Something is happening. Aldris turned and walked inside, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her. The central display showed local space, the familiar stars of the Valorian system, the peaceful orbits of their 3 moons, and then space itself began to tear. The first rift opened above the northern pole, a wound in reality that bled white light. Then another appeared, and another, until the sky was filled with them. From each rift, ships emerged. Not the graceful vessels of Council civilizations. These were brutal things, all angles and armor, painted in dark colors with harsh names etched on their hulls. The communications array screamed with activity, and a human voice filled the chamber. Valorian Confederacy. This is Admiral Elena Costa of the United Earth Navy. We apologize for our late arrival. Quantum fold technology is still experimental, and we had some calibration issues. Premier Aldris stared at the display. Human ships continued to pour through the rifts. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, each one bristling with weapons that the Valorian sensors could barely identify. Admiral Costa, Aldris said, her voice barely steady. You said you would send aid. This is not aid. This is an invasion force. A laugh came through the speakers, warm and unexpected. Premier, where we come from, this is aid. Besides, we brought friends. More rifts opened. Ships emerged that Aldous recognized from historical records. The massive carrier hives of the Kesori swarm, the crystalline warships of the Luminary Guardians, the living vessels of the Morvathi Collective, even the angular shadows of the Vethrani themselves, ancient beings that had not gone to war in 10,000 years. Admiral Costa's voice continued. After Ambassador Reed's speech, some of our new allies decided they did not want to miss the fight. The Kesori High Queen said, and I quote, that she refused to let humans have all the glory. The Luminari simply showed up and started taking formation positions. And High Arbiter Morvith. She paused. He said he wanted to see what foolish hope looked like in action. Premier Aldris felt something she had not felt in weeks. Her empathic senses, so accustomed to fear, detected a new emotion spreading through her people. Wonder. Disbelieving, overwhelming wonder. How many ships? She managed to ask. 4,000 human vessels. 18,000 allied ships. We are still counting the volunteers who jumped in without authorization. The Admiral's voice turned serious. Premier, we are not here to watch your people die. We are here to make sure the Hollow never reaches your world. But we are going to need your help. Our help? Aldris spread her hands helplessly. We have no military, no weapons. We are a peaceful species. Exactly. Your people are empaths. You can sense emotions, broadcast them, connect minds across vast distances. We have ships and soldiers from 100 different species who have never worked together. Some of them have been enemies for millennia. If we fight as individuals, we will lose. But if you can link us, coordinate us, make us feel what our allies feel. The Admiral left the sentence unfinished. Aldris understood. The Valorians could not fight, but they could do something that no other species in the galaxy could do. They could make an army of strangers into a family. We will do it, she said. Tell your ships to open their minds. My people will handle the rest. On the bridge of the human flagship Prometheus, Admiral Costa smiled and turned to her executive officer, Commander Marcus Webb. The Valorians are in. Begin positioning the fleet for defensive formation Omega-7. Webb, a tall man with dark skin and silver-streaked hair, nodded and began issuing orders. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were young, most of them. The oldest was barely 40. None of them had ever fought a real battle. Admiral, the sensor officer called out. Contact at extreme range. The Hollow advanced scouts. Costa walked to the main display. A single hollow vessel appeared at the edge of the system, a twisted mass of organic material and stolen technology. It hung in space for a long moment, as if studying the fleet arrayed against it. Then it broadcast a message on all frequencies. The voice was wrong. A chorus of millions of consumed minds speaking in terrible unison. Yield. Surrender biological materials for processing. Resistance will increase suffering duration. Costa picked up the command microphone. Hollow vessel. This is Admiral Elena Costa of the United Earth Navy. Speaking on behalf of the unified fleet, we have a counteroffer. She nodded to her weapons officer. Lieutenant Pavel Novak. Show them what we think of their offer. The Prometheus fired. A single railgun round, a slug of dense metal accelerated to 15% of light speed. At that velocity, it carried more kinetic energy than a nuclear warhead. The hollow scout vessel did not have time to react. One moment it existed. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of debris, scattered across 1,000,000 miles of space. The bridge crew was silent. Costa's voice came through clear and cold. All ships, this is Admiral Costa. That was the first shot of the Battle of Veloria. There will be many more. Some of us will not survive. But I want you to remember something." She paused, looking around her bridge at the young faces, the scared faces, the faces of humans who had chosen to travel across the galaxy to die for strangers. 6,000 years ago, 12 civilizations gave their lives trying to stop the Hollow. They failed because they fought alone, each species defending only itself. Today, we are going to show the Hollow something they have never seen. We are going to show them what happens when the galaxy fights together. On every ship in the fleet, beings from 100 different worlds heard her words. And on Veloria Prime, Premier Alders reached out with her mind and began to weave them together. The Kesori felt the determination of human soldiers. The Luminari experienced the ancient resolve of the Vethrani. The Morvathi tasted the quiet courage of the Valorian people they had come to protect. Across 22,000 ships, walls that had stood for millennia began to crumble, replaced by something new. Trust. Fragile and uncertain, but real. The sensor arrays screamed warnings. More contacts. Thousands of them. Millions. The main Hollow fleet was arriving. A wall of darkness that seemed to swallow the stars themselves. Admiral Costa watched the display fill with red icons until the tactical computer gave up trying to count them. "All ships," she said quietly. "Weapons free. Hold the line." The Battle of Veloria began with a scream of energy weapons and the thunder of mass drivers. Human ships, outnumbered 100 to 1, charged into the darkness with weapons blazing, and for the first time in 6,000 years, the Hollow found something they had not expected: prey that fought back. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Commander Webb watched the tactical display with growing amazement. Human ships were taking damage, some were dying, but they were not breaking. Neither were their allies. The Kesori swarm fighters moved in perfect coordination with luminary energy lenses. Morvathi living ships provided cover for damaged human cruisers. "Admiral," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "It is working. The Valorian empathic link. We are actually fighting as one force." Costa nodded, her face grim. "For now. But this is just the first wave. The Hollow are testing us, probing our defenses. And when they stop testing?" Admiral Costa did not answer. She did not need to. They both knew that the real battle had not yet begun. In the darkness of space, the Hollow watched and calculated and prepared. And deep in the heart of their fleet, something ancient began to stir. 12 hours into the Battle of Veloria, and the unified fleet was dying. Commander Marcus Webb stood at the tactical display of the Prometheus, watching red icons vanish one by one. Each disappearance represented a ship, a crew, hundreds or thousands of lives snuffed out in an instant. The Hollow had stopped testing. They had begun to consume. "Casualty report," Admiral Costa demanded from her command chair. "We have lost 412 ships," Webb replied, his voice flat with exhaustion. "The Kesori have taken the heaviest losses. Their swarm fighters are too small to survive direct Hollow contact. The Morvathi are down to half strength. And our ships? 217 destroyed. Another 94 too damaged to continue fighting." Costa closed her eyes. In 12 hours, they had lost nearly a third of the fleet. And the Hollow kept coming. Endless waves of twisted vessels that regenerated damage faster than the combined firepower of 22,000 ships could inflict it. Lieutenant Novak looked up from his weapons console. "Admiral, we have another problem. The Hollow are adapting to our railgun rounds. Their outer vessels are growing denser armor plating. Our standard ammunition is becoming less effective. Then use the heavier rounds. We are running low." The bridge fell silent. Every officer knew what those words meant. Without ammunition, without weapons that could hurt the Hollow, they would simply be waiting to die. Costa stood and walked to the main display. The Hollow fleet filled the screen, millions of vessels arranged in formations that seemed to shift and change like living things. In the center of their mass, something enormous moved. A command vessel, perhaps? A queen ship of some kind. "Get me Premier Aldris," she ordered. The Valorian leader appeared on screen moments later. Her lavender skin had gone almost white, and her 4 eyes were bloodshot from the strain of maintaining the empathic link across thousands of ships. Behind her, dozens of Valorian telepaths lay unconscious, overwhelmed by the psychic feedback of so much death. "Admiral Costa," Aldris said, her voice trembling. "My people cannot sustain this much longer. The link is breaking down. Your soldiers are beginning to feel alone again. I know. I need you to hold it together for a little while longer. We are going to try something." "What kind of something?" Costa turned to Webb. "The quantum destabilizer. Is it ready?" Webb's face went pale. "Admiral, that weapon was classified experimental. The scientists said there was a 30% chance it would cause a chain reaction that could destroy everything within 2 light years. I know what the scientists said. Is it ready?" "Yes, but Admiral, if we use it, we might kill everyone. The entire fleet. Veloria Prime. Everything." Costa walked back to her chair and sat down heavily. She was 57 years old, and she had spent her entire adult life preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now it was here, and she was losing. "The Hollow will reach Veloria Prime in approximately 6 hours if we cannot stop them," she said quietly. "When they do, they will consume 12 billion people. Then they will move on to the next world, and the next, until there is nothing left. Everything we have done, everything we have sacrificed, will be meaningless." She looked at her bridge crew, at the young faces that had trusted her to lead them. "I am not going to let that happen, even if it costs us everything." Webb stepped forward. "Then let me do it. The Prometheus can get close enough to deploy the weapon into the heart of their fleet. 1 ship, 1 crew. Everyone else can withdraw to a safe distance." "Marcus, that is suicide." "Yes," he agreed. "But it is my suicide to choose. You stay here, coordinate the withdrawal. Tell the story of what happened today. Make sure people remember." Costa stood and faced her oldest friend, a man who had served beside her for 30 years. There were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Are you sure?" Webb smiled, and there was peace in his expression. "Elena, I have been ready to die for something that matters since I was 18 years old. Let me finally do it." Costa embraced him, a brief human gesture that meant more than words could express. Then she stepped back and saluted. "Go, and give them hell." Webb turned to the crew. "Anyone who wants to leave, the escape pods are ready. I will not order anyone to stay." No one moved. Lieutenant Novak stood up from his console. "Commander, I have been waiting my whole life to do something worth dying for. I am not leaving now." The navigation officer, a young woman named Torres, nodded in agreement. "Take us in, Commander. Let us show these things what humans are made of." One by one, every officer on the bridge stood. Webb felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of grief and pride that threatened to overwhelm him. "Then let us finish this." The Prometheus broke formation and accelerated toward the heart of the Hollow fleet. Around it, the remaining ships of the unified force began to withdraw, creating distance from the coming detonation. On the open channel, Admiral Costa's voice rang out. "All ships, this is Admiral Costa. The Prometheus is making a sacrifice run into the enemy formation. They are carrying a weapon that may end this battle. But there is a chance, a significant chance, that the detonation will destroy everything nearby. Pull back to minimum safe distance." Premier Aldris's voice joined hers. My people can feel what the crew of the Prometheus is feeling. They are afraid, but they are not turning back. They are doing this for us. For all of us. Across the fleet, beings from 100 different worlds felt it through the empathic link. The terror of the Prometheus crew. Their determination. Their love for the strangers they were dying to protect. The hollow vessels converged on the lone human ship, recognizing the threat. Weapons fire tore at its hull. Armor plating melted. Systems failed one by one, but the Prometheus kept going. Webb sat in the command chair, surrounded by fire and chaos. Half his crew was dead. The ship was barely holding together. But the navigation display showed they were almost there, almost at the center of the hollow formation. Novak, he said, his voice calm despite everything. Arm the weapon. Weapon armed, Commander. Detonation on your command. Webb looked at the display one last time. The hollow queen ship loomed before them, a mountain of twisted flesh and stolen metal. Around it, millions of vessels pulsed with hungry life. You know, he said to no one in particular, in the old stories, Prometheus was the one who brought fire to humanity. Seems fitting that we return the favor. He pressed the detonation trigger. For a single instant, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to scream out. The quantum destabilizer tore a hole in reality, a wound that expanded outward at nearly the speed of light. Everything it touched ceased to exist, not destroyed, but simply unwritten from the fabric of the universe. The hollow queen ship vanished. Then the vessels around it. Then more and more. A cascade of annihilation that spread through the enemy formation like fire through dry grass. From the edge of the battle zone, Admiral Costa watched the display with tears streaming down her face. The chain reaction was happening, just as the scientists had warned. But it was not expanding outward. It was contained somehow, focused by the dense mass of hollow vessels, feeding on their twisted energy. My God, she whispered. When it was over, nearly half the hollow fleet had simply ceased to exist. The rest were scattered, disorganized, their collective consciousness reeling from the sudden loss of millions of connected minds, and the Prometheus was gone. Vaporized along with the enemy they had died to destroy. Premier Aldris spoke into the silence, her voice breaking. The humans have names for people who do what Commander Webb and his crew did. They call them heroes. My people have a different word. We call them family. Costa wiped her eyes and straightened in her chair. The battle was not over. The hollow were damaged, but they were not destroyed. And somewhere in the darkness of deep space, more of them were coming. But for now, Veloria Prime was safe. 12 billion lives had been saved by the sacrifice of one ship's crew. All ships, Costa said, her voice steady despite her grief. Reform defensive positions. The hollow will regroup. When they do, we need to be ready. She looked at the empty space where the Prometheus had been, and she made a silent promise. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, and we will finish what you started. Somewhere far away, on the edge of the galaxy, the second hollow fleet detected the death of their advance force. Ancient minds, cold and patient, calculated the loss, and then they began to move. The unified fleet was celebrating its victory. When the sensors detected the second wave, Admiral Costa stood on the bridge of the cruiser Nemesis, her new flagship since the destruction of the Prometheus. Around her, officers who had been laughing moments ago fell silent as the tactical display filled with new contacts. How many? She asked, already knowing she did not want to hear the answer. 4 million vessels, Admiral, the sensor officer replied, his voice hollow. At least twice the size of the first fleet. They will arrive in approximately 8 hours. Costa gripped the edge of the command console until her knuckles went white. They had lost nearly half their ships destroying the first wave. They were out of heavy ammunition. Their crews were exhausted. And now a force twice as large was bearing down on them. "Can we retreat?" she asked. "Not fast enough. The hollow will catch us before we reach the quantum fold point." So that was it. They had won one battle only to lose the war. Everything they had sacrificed, Commander Webb and his crew, all the ships and lives lost in the past 12 hours, it would all be for nothing. Ambassador Thomas Reed's face appeared on the communication screen. He was still at the Galactic Council chambers, surrounded by delegates who were watching the battle unfold in real time. "Admiral Costa, I have been monitoring the situation. The Council is meeting in emergency session, but most species are preparing evacuation protocols, not reinforcements. They do not believe we can win. They might be right." Reed shook his head. "No, there has to be something we can do. Some way to change the equation." Costa looked at her display, at the vast darkness approaching, and something clicked in her mind. "Thomas, during the first battle, how many beings across the galaxy were watching our feeds?" "Watching?" Reed frowned, considering. The Council broadcast was available to all member worlds. Probably several trillion beings in total. And they saw everything? The Prometheus? Webb's sacrifice? Yes, it was. Reed paused, understanding dawning in his eyes. It was powerful. People wept. Species that have been enemies for centuries were mourning together. Costa leaned forward. "Thomas, I need you to do something. Something that might get you expelled from the Council, might even start a diplomatic incident. But it is the only chance we have. Name it." When the Valorians made first contact with the Council, they gave us access to their communication archives. Hidden in those files was a dormant program, a virus that could theoretically access every connected system in the galaxy. Reed's face went pale. The fail-safe protocol. That was supposed to be a last resort against extinction-level threats. If we activate it without Council authorization, we are facing an extinction-level threat, Thomas. And the Council is not going to authorize anything except running and hiding. Costa's voice hardened. Activate the virus. Broadcast everything happening here to every screen, every display, every communication device in the galaxy. Let them see what we are facing. Let them see that we are still fighting. And if no one comes, then at least they will know. They will know that surrender is not the only option. That someone, somewhere, chose to stand and fight. Costa smiled grimly. That has to be worth something. Reed was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I will do it. But Elena, if this does not work, we die. But we were going to die anyway. She straightened in her chair. Do it now? And Thomas? Tell them the truth. Tell them we need help. The transmission ended. Costa turned to her bridge crew. I want every ship in the fleet broadcasting their feeds. I want the galaxy to see what happens here today, whatever the outcome. On Veloria Prime, Premier Alders felt the change before she saw it. The empathic field shifted, expanded, as billions of minds suddenly connected to the battle through the broadcast. Fear washed through the link, horror, despair, but underneath it all, something else. Something unexpected. Anger. Across the galaxy. Beings who had spent their entire lives accepting that the Hollow were unstoppable, watched humans die fighting them. They saw Commander Webb smile as he flew into oblivion. They saw alien species working together, protecting each other, sacrificing for strangers. And they asked themselves a question that had not been asked in 6,000 years. Why are we not there? On the Kesori homeworld, the High Queen watched the broadcast from her throne. Beside her, her military advisors urged retreat, evacuation, the preservation of their species. But the Queen was old enough to remember stories her grandmother had told about the last great darkness. "Ready the reserve fleet." She said quietly, "Your Majesty, that would leave our homeworld undefended. If the humans fall, our homeworld will be consumed regardless." The Queen rose, her massive insectoid body creaking with age. "If there is to be a final battle, the Kasori will not watch from the sidelines." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Luminary Council of Light convened an emergency session and voted unanimously to deploy their guardian vessels. The Morvathi Collective, already bleeding from losses at Valoria, committed their remaining forces without hesitation. Even the Travari, the ancient warrior race that had conquered half the galaxy before the Council stopped them, began mobilizing. Admiral Tessek, who had mocked humanity in the Council chambers, watched the broadcast with something like shame burning in his heart. "How many ships can we field?" he demanded. 7,000, Admiral. "But the distance to Valoria." "Plot a course." "Maximum speed." Tessek's reptilian face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "If we are going to die, better to die with honor than live with cowardice." The Second Hollow Fleet continued its approach, indifferent to the drama unfolding across the galaxy. Their collective mind calculated the remaining opposition, estimated the time required to consume Valoria and its defenders, and found the number satisfactory. What they did not calculate, could not calculate, was what was happening behind them. Quantum folds began opening. Not one or two, but hundreds. Then thousands. Ships poured through from every direction, vessels of every size and design, from civilizations that had never fought alongside each other before. The Tereth hegemony, isolationists who had not left their home system in 8 centuries, the children of the void, nomads who owed allegiance to no one, the dreaming collective, beings of pure thought who had manifested physical vessels for the first time in recorded history. Even High Arbiter Morvith came, leading the Vethrani Shadow Fleet, ships that had not been activated since the founding of the Council itself. Admiral, Costa watched her display fill with new contacts, friendly contacts, and felt tears streaming down her face. "How many?" she whispered. "Counting is still in progress, Admiral." The censor officer's voice was shaking. "Current estimate is approximately 800,000 vessels, and more are arriving every minute." The communication channel crackled with a familiar voice. Ambassador Reed, still at the council chambers, surrounded by chaos, as delegates screamed and shouted. "Elena, the broadcast worked. Every species that saw it is sending whatever they can spare. Some are sending everything." He laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. "The Galactic Council just voted to officially support the defense of Valoria. It was unanimous." Costa wiped her eyes and straightened in her chair. "All ships, this is Admiral Costa. Form up on our new allies. Coordinate with the Valorian Empathic Network." She paused, looking at the display. The Hollow Fleet, once overwhelming, now seemed almost small against the gathered might of the galaxy. "We came here to make a stand," she said. "It seems the galaxy decided to stand with us. Let us make sure their faith was not misplaced." Premier Aldris expanded the empathic link, connecting minds across 800,000 ships. For the first time in her life, she felt the combined consciousness of nearly every sentient species in the galaxy. It was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying, and underneath it all, burning like a flame that would not go out. She felt hope. The Second Hollow Fleet slowed, processing the new information. Their ancient minds had never encountered anything like this. Every species in the galaxy united against them, fighting not for territory or resources, but for each other. They did not understand. They could not understand, and that confusion, that moment of hesitation, would cost them everything. The Battle of Valoria entered its final phase. And this time, the galaxy fought as one. The final battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of continuous fighting, of ships burning and dying, of impossible victories and heartbreaking losses. The unified galactic fleet surrounded the Hollow Armada and pressed inward, grinding them down through sheer weight of numbers and coordinated fury. Admiral Costa barely slept. She moved from crisis to crisis, coordinating attacks, managing retreats, watching friends die and enemies fall. The empathic link that Premier Aldris maintained connected her to 800,000 ships, and she felt every loss as a physical blow. But the Hollow were falling. For the first time in their existence, they faced an enemy that would not run, would not break, would not surrender. Every time they adapted to one weapon, 3 more species would unleash something new. Every time they destroyed a ship, 10 more would take its place. On the 3rd day, the Hollow fleet began to fragment. Their collective consciousness, strained beyond its limits by losses it had never experienced, started to break down. Individual vessels began acting independently, losing the perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable. Admiral Tessek of the Dravari led the final charge. His fleet, battered but unbroken, drove deep into the heart of the Hollow formation. His flagship, the Conqueror, rammed directly into the largest remaining Hollow command vessel, detonating its quantum core in a blast that took out 17 enemy ships. His final words, transmitted across all channels: "Tell the humans that Tessek the Dravari died with his teeth in the enemy's throat. Tell them that is how warriors end." The Hollow fought until the last ship was destroyed. They did not surrender, did not negotiate, did not flee. They simply ceased to exist, consumed by the very galaxy they had tried to consume. When it was over, Costa stood on the bridge of the Nemesis and looked at the tactical display. Where millions of enemy vessels had been, there was only debris. The stars that the Hollow had obscured with their numbers were visible again, bright points of light in the infinite darkness. "Casualty report," she said, her voice hoarse from 3 days of constant orders. Her executive officer checked his display. 243,000 Allied vessels destroyed. Approximately 18 million confirmed casualties. But Admiral ... He looked up, his eyes wet. "We won. We actually won." Costa nodded slowly. The cost had been terrible, but they had done something that no one in 6,000 years had thought possible. They had stopped the Hollow. The communication channel crackled with an incoming transmission. Ambassador Reed's face appeared, exhausted but smiling. "Admiral Costa, the Galactic Council has been in continuous session since the battle began. They have come to several decisions." He glanced at something off-screen. "First, the United Earth Government is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges thereof." Costa laughed, a sound of pure release. "Better late than never." "Second, this day will be commemorated across all Council worlds as Remembrance Day. The names of every being who died in the Battle of Deloria will be recorded in the Council archives. Forever. Good. They deserve to be remembered." "Third," Reed paused, his expression becoming serious, "the Council has voted to create a new position, the Office of Supreme Military Coordinator, with authority to command the combined forces of all member species in times of galactic emergency." He smiled. "They have asked if you would accept the position, Admiral." Costa was silent for a long moment. She thought of Commander Webb, of Admiral Tessek, of the 18 million beings who had died following her orders. The weight of that responsibility was almost too much to bear. "Tell them I am honored," she finally said, "and tell them that I hope I never have to actually use the position." The celebration on Veloria Prime lasted for weeks. Species that had been enemies for millennia danced together in the floating gardens. The Kasori and the Drovari, ancient rivals, shared meals and stories. The Luminari created sculptures of light that depicted the battle's greatest moments in the Capitol spire. Premier Aldris hosted a quiet ceremony for the human delegation. Ambassador Reed, Admiral Costa, and the surviving senior officers of the original fleet gathered in a crystal chamber overlooking the city. "We asked for witnesses," Aldris said, her voice soft. "We asked for someone to remember us when we were gone. Instead, you came yourselves. You brought the galaxy. You saved us." Costa shook her head. "We did not save you alone, Premier. The Valorians saved themselves by giving us the empathic link. The Kesori and Morvathi and all the others saved themselves by choosing to fight. She smiled. "We just reminded everyone that fighting was an option." "Why?" Aldris asked. "Your species has known us for only a few decades. We have nothing to offer you. No resources, no technology, no strategic advantage. Why did you risk everything for strangers?" It was Reed who answered, his voice thoughtful. "Because that is what humans do, Premier. We fight for each other even when it does not make sense. Even when it hurts. We have been doing it since before we could write, before we could speak, before we knew there were stars in the sky." He walked to the window and looked out at the celebration below. "For most of our history, we fought among ourselves. It was our greatest weakness. But somewhere along the way, we learned that the family we choose is just as important as the family we are born into. That strangers can become brothers. That the universe is too vast and too dangerous to face alone." He turned back to Aldris. "You asked why we came. The truth is simple. You needed help, and we were able to help. That was enough." Aldris was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Reed's hands in her own, a gesture of profound intimacy among her people. "My species has existed for 10,000 years, she said. "We have met thousands of civilizations. Some were kind, some were cruel, some were indifferent. But we have never met a species quite like yours." She looked at Costa, at the other officers, at the faces of beings who had crossed the galaxy to fight for people they had never met. "I think the Hollow were not defeated by weapons or tactics. I think they were defeated by something they could not understand: love, loyalty, the willingness to die for others." She smiled. "You brought those things to the galaxy, Ambassador. Whatever happens in the centuries to come, that gift will endure." 6 months later, Admiral Costa stood before the Galactic Council in the same chamber where Reed had first warned them of the Hollow threat. The room was full. Every platform occupied delegates who had fought alongside humans at Veloria. High Arbiter Morvith called the session to order. His geometric form seemed softer somehow, less threatening than it had been. "We gather today to honor those who fell in defense of the galaxy," he said, "and to celebrate something remarkable. For the first time in our history, every species represented in this chamber fought as one. We faced an enemy that had destroyed 12 civilizations, and we stopped them." He turned to Costa. "Admiral, would you address the council?" Costa stepped forward. She was wearing her dress uniform, medals gleaming on her chest, but her face was tired. The weight of command had aged her, and she doubted she would ever truly rest again. "High Arbiter, honored delegates," she began. 6 months ago, humanity came to this chamber with a warning. You dismissed us as children, too young and foolish to understand the true nature of the universe. In some ways, you were right. A murmur ran through the chamber. Costa held up her hand. "We are young. We are foolish. We do not know when to quit, when to run, when to accept that something cannot be done. We look at impossible odds and think about how to beat them instead of how to survive them." She smiled. "Those are weaknesses. They have caused us tremendous suffering throughout our history. But at Veloria, those weaknesses became strengths. Because we were too stubborn to surrender, too foolish to flee, too young to know that the hollow could not be beaten. Costa looked around the chamber, meeting eyes from 100 different species. The hollow are gone, but darkness is patient. Someday, another threat will emerge. When it does, I hope we will face it together as we face the hollow. Not as separate species, not as ancient enemies, but as one galaxy, one family. She paused. The humans have a saying. It comes from an old story about a time when our world faced a great crisis, and all our nations came together to survive it. The saying is this: in our darkest hour, we found our greatest light. Costa spread her hands, encompassing the entire chamber. You are that light. All of you. Every species, every civilization, every being who chose to fight instead of flee. The hollow tried to consume us, and instead they united us. That is their legacy. That is what they gave us with their destruction. She stepped back. So thank you for fighting alongside us, for trusting us, for showing us that the galaxy is not as cold and empty as we once feared. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then High Arbiter Morvith rose. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we thank you, Admiral Costa, and we thank humanity. You came to us as strangers, and you leave as family. The applause began slowly, a ripple of sound that grew into a thunderous wave. Species that had never applauded before learned how. Beings that had no hands found other ways to express their approval. In the midst of it all, Admiral Elena Costa allowed herself a moment of peace. The war was over. The galaxy was safe. And humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the species that refused to let the darkness win. As she left the chamber, Ambassador Reed fell into step beside her. What now? He asked. Costa looked up at the stars visible through the crystal ceiling. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting for her. Home, family, a life beyond war. Now we build, she said. We take this unity we have forged and we make it last. We teach our children that the galaxy is their home, and all its people are their family. She smiled, and it was the smile of a species that had learned to hope. Now we show them what humans can do when we are not fighting for survival, when we can dream instead of just survive. Reed nodded. That sounds like a plan. They walked out into the endless night, surrounded by stars and allies and the infinite possibility of tomorrow. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between worlds, the galaxy breathed a little easier. The darkness had been pushed back. The light endured, and humanity had finally found its home.